Do you have a friend, a loved one, know someone that has a drug or alcohol addiction problem? They're an absolute mess, a train wreck. Well, there's hope for them. Don't believe me? Stick around and listen to our guest. She was sexually abused, physically abused by a stepfather. She became addicted to methamphetamines for a long period of time. Been sober now 31 years. Became a judge. She's an author of a book and more. She's here to tell her remarkable story on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those that have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Joining us from California, we have Mary Beth O'Connor on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. I gotta say this, I am so excited to talk with Mary Beth. And here's the reason why. I say this all the time. All the time. If you know someone, maybe it's you, a loved one, they got a drug or alcohol problem, they got other mental health issue problems, they're dealing with trauma, and they seem to be helpless, hopeless, do not give up on them. As long as they're breathing in and out, there's hope for them. And Mary Beth is a classic example. You've been sober now 31 years. Am I correct, Mary Beth?
I'll have 31 years in January, correct.
That is crazy. And I don't want to give away your story, but you became highly addicted. You used the term junkie. A lot of people get turned off by that, but you use the term junkie. And her website's Junkie to Judge, and her book, which I'll tell you in a moment. You became highly addicted to methamphetamine, didn't you?
As a teenager, yes. I mean, I started drugs early. I was doing it to excess right away, and I escalated up to shooting meth by 17, and I didn't get sober till 32. So it was a long haul for me. There's a lot of parallels in our story. I didn't do meth. I didn't do any of that stuff, but I had to develop an alcohol problem, and I got sober at 32. And that was the changing point in my life. It's like, it's time to grow up and it's time to create the life you want. That was the thing that got me, is I was so tired of the life I had, and it wasn't all bad. There was a lot of really good things in it, but it wasn't a life I wanted. Yes. I mean, for me, it was that cumulative impact of misery, too, right? I mean, felt really stuck. I felt, exhausted beyond exhausted, just hopeless and trapped, and I didn't want to go forward like this. At the same time, finding a way out can be challenging, or even believing there's a way out can be challenging. And so that first step is always the most important. It's really, and a lot of people don't survive to make that a first step. And there are a lot of parallels in the story. There's a lot of differences. One of the things, and I want to go to her website, is junkietoJudge.com. She also wrote a book called From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, which we will talk about later on. One of the things that a lot of people don't seem to get, and they don't seem to understand, number one, is two questions I want to pose to you. I went to your website, junkietoJudge.com. I saw a picture of you, and I was like, if I was in a grocery store talking to this woman, I never, ever, ever would have imagined that you went through what you went through. Never. Looks can be very deceiving. That's right. I mean, but that's what 30 years of sobriety looks like, right? I mean, that picture isn't from year one, and it's certainly not from when I was using, because things would have looked a lot different. It's a cumulative forward momentum process, and especially after the first 2 or 3 years, we mostly do blend into society at that point. Right. And one of the things, the other question I have is a lot of people that have, I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people that have drug or alcohol addiction issues, substance abuse problems, whatever terminology people want to use, whatever floats your boat, they didn't do that by choice. They were trying to escape something. They're self-medicating to escape the results of trauma, other mental health issues, whatever it might be. Am I off base with that? No, I mean those are the two highest indicators that someone's going to develop a long-term substance problem, and that's trauma and or other mental health conditions. And that's what it was for me. It's why in my book I talk about both, because there's an interplay. The reality is, and sometimes people don't want to admit it, but in the beginning the drugs seemed to work.
Yeah, well, they did work.
Yes, in the beginning they were a pain management tool. In the beginning, you actually experience highs and fun times with your friends. And so there's a very attractive reason for it to start with. And it's just that over time, if you develop a problem with it, the misery outweighs the benefits. But in the beginning, it seems like it's a solution to sort of the misery of your life or the mental health symptoms that you may not be having properly treated.
My issue was I was so affected by trauma from police work that I had difficulty sleeping and I had difficulty winding down. And I found that alcohol worked really well for that for a long period of time until it didn't anymore, until it became another problem.
That's right. And that's why a lot of times when it's important to look at what sort of purpose the substance is having for you. Now, don't get me wrong. I had a problem very fast. I mean, when I first drank, which was when I was 12, and it was Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill
Now
wine.
You're taking me back. Stop it. Stop it right now. I'm going to start reminiscing about the 8-track playing Leonard Skinner, and I was in a car with some girl, I don't remember her name, and I'm drinking Boone's Farm and thinking I'd never get better than this, and it never did.
Yes, I mean a very popular introductory drug in my day. But what captured my attention was how much better it made me feel, which meant I wanted to pursue it. And so I was pursuing drugs to excess early. I moved on to weed and pills. I did a lot of acid for a while, and then at 16 found meth. But even in the drug group of my town, I was people were cautioning me against overuse. So even the other drug users were saying, Mary Beth, you need to slow down.
Well, you got a problem when people that have problems tell you, oh, look, you're a wreck. You need to take it easy.
That's right. And so, of course, I didn't listen and I didn't care, but that was really where I was. It was always to excess. Every level of it was to excess. And meth, for whatever biochemical reason, just fit me the best. And so when I found it, all the other drugs became secondary to me. I really wanted meth. I think my terminology is I was very committed to meth. Very
quickly. And look, I to this day do not understand the correlation. I don't understand the correlation between trauma and in my case, alcohol. I don't understand it. I've just learned to accept it. And for me, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. And I don't understand the whole DNA thing that genetically I'm predisposed to this, whatever. I don't care. I just don't care. I want to have a happy life. How accurate is that for you?
Well, I mean, I definitely, that is true, but I did care in the sense that I knew that my trauma history, and I had child abuse, physical, sexual assaults outside the home, violent boyfriend. I mean, I knew that the violence was underneath my drug use. And so when I got sober, I knew that if I didn't address that, I was never going to be happy and productive and maybe couldn't stay sober.
Right.
So I had to work on both. And so when I got home from rehab, I really found a therapist with trauma expertise to start that work. So why, it wasn't so much as to the why, it was that if I don't address it now, my future is going to be impacted. I'll never really be happy if I don't deal with this pain.
And that was the same, very similar for me. And it was at 32, I was in a right mood. I was a right time in my life where I said, okay, maybe I'll try this. Maybe you're onto something. And here's what it boiled down to for me, Mary Beth, was I saw these other people and they seemed to be happy. They seemed to have productive lives. And no matter how hard I tried, and I had a lot of willpower in a lot of areas of my life, no matter how hard I try, I exert myself, I couldn't achieve what they did.
Yeah, I mean, my terminology for me is that I had worked my way down the corporate ladder after law school. I mean, after college, because I couldn't hold a job, right? And so everyone around me was moving forward, and I was losing ground. Every year, I was losing more and more ground. But what you'd say is also important.
Well, let me cut you off. We're going to come back to this conversation with Mary Beth O'Connor in just a few moments. Mary Beth is a fascinating fascinating case. She became highly addicted to methamphetamine for many years. She's been sober now 31 years. She became a judge. She's authored the book From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. Her website is junkietoJudge.com. When we return, we're going to talk about her childhood and what started all this. Don't go anywhere. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We'll be right back. Did you know that there are 3 things you can do to dramatically increase your revenue, both offline and online? That's one of the things you'll learn at CreativeCon 2025. Meet me, John J. Wiley, the host of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast at CreativeCon, located at the Intercontinental Hotel in Chicago, February 21st through 23rd. If you're an entrepreneur, business leader, author, podcaster, or online professional of any type, you'll learn how to take your business to the next level. CreativeCon 2025 is the ultimate business and networking event. There's too much to list at CreativeCon 2025. Get details at CRE8tive.com. That's CreativeCon 2025 at the fabulous Intercontinental Hotel, Chicago, February 21st to 23rd, 2025. Get more information online at CRE8tive.com. That's CRE8tive.com. Return to conversation with Mary Beth O'Connor. She is in California. She is a fascinating story. And I'll say this again. If you have someone you love in your life, maybe it's you, that's got a drug or alcohol problem and you're about ready to give up hope, don't give up hope on them, because no one's a lost cause. And Mary Beth is a great example. She's highly addicted to methamphetamine. She's been sober now 31 years, author of the book From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, and her website is junkietoJudge.com. One of the things that I can't stand, Mary Beth, is, I'm not going to name names, but there's certain channels where it's like, they all have idyllic lives. I didn't have a bad life growing up. My parents were great people. We grew up poor. We did a lot of things, but you were on the opposite end of the spectrum where it was just a nightmare after nightmare, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it didn't start out well. My mother, wasn't connected to me. I was actually left at a nunnery for the first 6 months of my life, and, so a poor start. But when I was 9, she married my stepfather, and things got much, much worse. I mean, he was very violent with her. He was physically, sexually violent with me, and it was just a super high-stress environment. And so I was always walking on eggshells and never knew what was going to happen to me, couldn't control it. So it was just anxiety-producing and very, very stressful.
So we're of similar age. I went to boarding boys high school as a seminary. I wanted to be a priest before I turned into police work. I didn't have the calling. I can't imagine being abandoned in a nunnery or convent when you're a little one.
Yeah, my husband said that I reminded him of the monkeys who weren't touched enough as babies. I mean, I'm sure the nuns, fed me, clothed me, changed me, but there was a disruption in the parental relationship from day one. And even when I moved in with my mother, she wasn't interested in what I was doing. She wasn't supportive. She just wanted, peace and quiet and do what she says. So I didn't have that kind of, that normal supportive bond with a parent.
I sit there and think... And the first thing that came to my mind, and granted it's a totally different subject, but my dad, he passed away many years ago from lung cancer. And we'd always ask him, and I'm from an Irish Catholic family with 4 younger sisters, and we're a quite boisterous crowd. And we'd always ask him, what do you want for Father's Day? What do you want for Christmas? What do you want for your birthday? And he'd always say, I want some peace and quiet. And the poor guy never, ever got what he wanted. Ever.
Yeah, my husband actually will say that occasionally currently, so I understand.
I think it's a male thing. We need it more than anything else, and until we don't need it more, then we go, hey, I want action. There's no keeping us happy. But your story, when you think, and granted you're very young, but people would think, oh, your mom got married, things are getting better, but that was like stepping out of the fire, or out of the frying pan into the fire, wasn't it?
Yes, and at first I was surprised. I mean, I thought, okay, he's got different rules. Let me try to follow these rules. But then very shortly it became clear that it didn't matter what I did. I mean, you could do the same thing 10 times, and 9 times there'd be no reaction, and the 10th time it was like the worst thing anybody ever did. And so there was no sort of causal relationship between my behavior and what happened to me. And that was really took a while to understand and then to adapt. And I tried to do things to reduce the risk. You know, I had like strategies, for example, to not make noise when opening the door or putting the dishes away. But in the long run, there was no controlling him because it was about him. It really wasn't about me.
Yeah, you happen to be on the receiving end. It would have been anybody. I'm not saying this to cast any aspersions on your story, but he would have lashed out at anyone that was handy.
Yes, and I mean, and he was very violent with my mother. I think that has a big impact on kids as well because you're seeing, one adult hurt the other adult, but also it means she can't help you because she can't protect herself.
It leaves a horrible message, and even I learned this the hard way. Even arguing in front of your children, if you're like me, and especially back in the day, I'm much more mellower now. I was never physically violent, but I would say things and yell, and that would create an unsafe environment for the children, and it had a profound effect on them. And people, when you say, I'm not violent, that's great. You need to stop arguing in front of your children. That goes to men and women.
That's true. But especially if there has been any violence, every time there's a raised voice, it's like we would freeze, my sister and I, because you don't know when it's going to go from raised voice to physical violence. And so as soon as there's a loud voice, our full attention is focused on him and what's going to happen next. How
long a period of time, how many years of your life did this go on?
I lived with him for 10 years.
How old were you when it finally, either you left or he left or whatever?
I left for college, and so that's how I got out of it. I left from New Jersey, where I grew up, and I came to California for college, as far away as I could get.
Gotcha. And you would think, okay, this is where the white picket fence, all that stuff comes. You meet the love of your life, things go on, and life gets great. That was not in the cards for you, was it?
No, and that's true for so many of us with the violence history. I mean, first of all, I didn't have much money in college, and I lived in poor neighborhoods. And so I had like 2 muggings when I was in college, but I also had a really life-threatening kidnapping by 3 men and 6-hour rape by all of them. And so the violence just kept piling on. And I felt like I couldn't get away from it. Like, sort of, what's so wrong with me that these things keep happening? And it just made me focus on the chemicals again. Drugs were the solution at home. I guess I'm going to turn and increase my usage again. And I started using heavily again toward the end of my senior year, and didn't get sober for 10 more years. You would think.
And by the way, let's just go back a little bit. You started drinking. You started experimenting with substances when you were 12. Now You're what, 21?
Yeah, 22, 23 at the end of college. Yeah.
So that's a long period of time. And a lot of things went on, I'm sure, during that time period. You already said some really tough things that I don't want to gloss over. I acknowledge that you went through these things. But you went through a lot of things at the hands of other people. And I'm sure during that time period, you went through things where it was a little less than favorable for you based off what you did with the substances.
Yeah. I mean, my behavior wasn't always perfect. I mean, certainly I put myself in risky situations at times over substances. I mean, not all drug dealers are safe, right?
No. That's why they're called drug dealers, and they're pretty dangerous people.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I grew up in a small town, so a lot of them were just the guys in town, right? Yeah. They're people but there were some people that were dangerous, and yet that wasn't a high factor in my mind. But it's also because I grew up with violence. I didn't give it the same weight that maybe someone else would. So to me, it had to be pretty extreme for me to actually pay any attention to it.
This is a kind of wake up and Smell the coffee conversation. We're talking with Mary Beth O'Connor. She survived abuse, trauma as a child from an abusive stepfather who also sexually abused her. She was sexually abused, attacked, and violated as an adult. Got addicted to methamphetamine, was addicted for many years, got sober at 31. She's the author of the book From Junkie to Judge. We'll talk about that in a moment. One woman's triumph over trauma and addiction. Her website is junkietoJudge.com. This is a law enforcement talk radio show. We're going to talk more about Mary Beth's story in a few moments. You don't want to miss it, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Here's your chance to get into the ground floor, to make a donation to make the movie Gun Runner, based off of the true story of now retired police detective Maria Oliveira, who shot 6 times while investigating a crime, died 3 times, brought back to life, was in the hospital for a month, rushed back to work, only to suffer a near-fatal heart attack, and then several months later, a near-fatal stroke. It talks about his recovery, his life after, and more. That's at gunrunnerfilm.com. Again, you can make a donation at gunrunnerfilm.com.
Did you know that there are people earning $30,000 or more per month from Meta or Facebook? Did you know that you can too? All without breaking the time bank. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Return to conversation with Mary Beth O'Connor on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. She survived abuse, trauma, huge physical trauma as a child, also sexual abuse from her stepfather. She was sexually abused, molested, raped, became addicted to methamphetamine, stayed that way for a long time. She's now been sober over 31 years, and she's author of the book From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, and her website is junkietoJudge.com. That term, judge, should get your attention. We'll talk about it in a few moments. I hear the stories, and as a police and my own personal experience, I see people that have tremendous problems, and some of them don't survive. Some of them wind up going to jails, and some of them, and we don't get to see them very often, they turn their lives around. And they usually, and it's not that there's a small minority of them, it's that they're busy doing other things. They're living life, so we don't get to see them. You made a remarkable transformation. We look at the person now, you go to junkietoJudge.com, see a picture of Mary Beth, and you go, there's no way. There's no way she went through this. It's not the same person. But you said earlier in the conversation, if you took a photo in your first days, it would look totally different, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be very different. I mean, that's the good side of recovery is that you get to sort of participate in life without all that weight on your shoulders. You can be sort of a full-fledged member of your community. I can hold a job. I can be a wife and a friend and actually show up for you, and I can resolve my problems instead of, making my problems worse. It's a whole new world in recovery.
It certainly is, for sure. And earlier in the conversation, you said something that's very important. I think that we need to talk a little bit about. And I'm going to paraphrase. If I don't stay sober, I'm not going to heal from the trauma. If I don't deal with the trauma, I probably won't stay sober. How accurate is that for not just me, it's very accurate, but for you and for a lot of other people?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was aware of the pain, even though I had shoved it down and done my best to keep it down with the drugs. And so on one hand, my biggest fear going to rehab was, how am I going to deal with the pain? Like, that's what, kept me sort of stuck where I was for a long time. And that was my biggest concern as we were driving there. But at the same time, I also thought, well, if I'm going to have any realistic chance of succeeding, I got to deal with the trauma. I didn't know how I was going to deal with it or if I could actually manage to heal from it, but I knew if I didn't address it, I was going to stay miserable and probably not be able to stay sober.
You were hitting the bell right on the head, the bell on the head, and it's my story is if I couldn't find a way to feel better, to heal from the trauma and to become, I hate this term is overused, to become more centered and have the kind of life I wanted, then there's no way I'd stay sober because I'd always resort to this stuff to try to self-medicate. And then that would raise its ugly head and create more problems for me.
Right. But the other thing I'll say is that for me, my trauma recovery took a lot longer than my sobriety
you're preaching
recovery.
to the choir, sister.
Yeah.
And I didn't go through what you went through. Look, I want to clarify something. My mother was an awesome person. She still is. My dad was an awesome father. We didn't have the violence. We didn't have all that stuff. We didn't have the traumas that Mary Beth is talking about. What I went through was a lot of trauma, a lot of physical attacks on me as a police officer, and it had a profound impact on me. And so there's similarities. Our similarities is in the end result. It's not in how we got there, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I will say for my trauma recovery, I did like multiple things. I mean, I was in individual therapy at first with a woman, a therapist who had expertise in trauma, and I was on meds for a couple of years. But then at 3 years into my recovery, she put me in group therapy with women with trauma histories, and that was like a whole new level of recovery. So it was multi-phased, and I was in therapy of one type or another for 9 years before I really said I was mostly recovered. I was probably 80% recovered at that point. So it was a lot of work, and it took a long time. But it's always, incrementally better, right? I mean, it's not 9 years of misery and a light switch. It's, better.
Right.
But it's definitely a gradual process.
Well, and I use the analogy, if you went to bed being all messed up from whatever, and you woke up and everything was fantastic, you'd be like a different person. You wouldn't know how to live. You wouldn't know what to do with yourself. So it's got to be gradual. Otherwise, what other option is there?
There isn't another. Now, don't get me wrong. When I got sober, I'm 32. I had basically wasted my life. I wanted it to be fast, but, realistically, that's not how it works, especially when it's such deep pain that, was created over many years. And when, I'd shoved it down for so long. When I went into therapy, my therapist would ask me questions like, how do you feel about that? And I would look at her confused. Like, she had to give me a laminated card with feelings on it.
Say it. I would get with a little smiley face, the angry face. I had 2 emotions or 3 emotions. I'm okay, I'm angry, and I'm happy. That's it. How are you feeling? I don't know. Why don't you tell me? I'm getting frustrated.
Yes, exactly right. So that's the level at which I was starting. Like, I couldn't even name my feelings, and so it was a lot of work from there. But even though I wasn't moving as fast as I wanted to, I did have to force myself to notice the progress, because my natural inclination is negative thinking, catastrophize, especially because for me, my PTSD showed up as anxiety. So I had to force myself to pause and look backward and see my forward progress.
I was always told my mind is like a bad neighborhood. Don't go there by yourself. you spend a lot of time thinking it's usually bad stuff. I want to go into what prompted you to change your life, because it's a massive change, and the miracle for many people is what precedes it.
Yeah, and for me, it wasn't like an epiphany moment. It was really sort of like a cumulative wearing down. I couldn't hold a job. I was just emotionally devastated. I mean, I felt so miserable and so trapped, and I saw no way forward. I just couldn't imagine. And my partner was ready to throw me out. And so it was sort of like everything together where I finally said, well, maybe I ought to go to rehab. And it wasn't even that I thought I could get sober. I didn't really believe sobriety was on the table. I thought, well, maybe I can figure out how to use less, how to do better.
Let me know when you figure that one out. I haven't figured that one out yet.
But that was as far as my imagination could go. Maybe I can figure out how to do better. And so it was a process for me to even start to believe sobriety was an option on the table. It took me a while to even believe that possibility. And it was also, I wasn't perfect in sobriety. I used 3 times in my first 5 months. But, that was a heck of a lot better, right?
Right. I got to ask you this, and then we'll go into your story. One of the big things for me was I wasn't sure I wanted this, and I saw other sober people. I'm like, I don't want to be like that.
I wanted to be, happy. I wanted to enjoy my life. I wanted to be who I remembered having been at one point. I'd always done well in school. I liked to work. I had lost my connection to so many parts of myself. I did want those connections back. I sort of wanted to be the person that I knew I should have been if I wasn't pumping drugs into myself for 20 years.
Right. And look, it sounds dramatic to say that, but that's the truth. And I don't think you say that for a fact. I think you say it as an explanation.
Yes. And it took a while to even, remember her, to really reconnect to her, because when your world gets so narrow when you're in the middle of a long-term, substance use disorder, right, and addiction, it's just, you see less and less, and things are sort of grayed out, and the whole focus is on drug use, or 99% of it. And so I wanted to be, the Mary Beth who used to actually enjoy life.
Yeah, we're talking with Mary Beth O'Connor, and I'm saying because I can relate 100%. She survived abusive trauma, physical, sexual trauma as a child from a stepfather, was physically abused, physically violated, assaulted, sexually assaulted as an adult, became addicted to drugs, methamphetamine, for many, many years. She's been sober now over about 31 years, and authored the book From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. And her website is junkietoJudge.com. We'll talk about the judge part, I promise you, when we return. This is the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Remember when news was free? Be sure to check out the Newsbreak app. It's free. And be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. That's the free Newsbreak app. Be sure to look for and follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast.
Learn how you can be ultra successful on Facebook and possibly earn an income from Meta. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com, letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Return a conversation with Mary Beth O'Connor on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. She survived horrendous abuse as a child, physical, sexual assaults, you name it. Also the same as an adult outside of the house. And she became addicted to drugs, was addicted for many years. She used the term junkie. A lot of people take exception to that. I don't. She's authored the book From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. And her website is junkietoJudge.com. Mary Beth, first of all, the term junkie, a lot of people put a negative connotation on it. They same thing with drunk, they same thing with alcoholic, whatever it might be. And that's a statement about them. That's not a statement about the individual. And that's me on my soapbox. It's a good explanation of where we were. It's not who we were. So your response to that, before we go into your story.
Yeah, and I wouldn't use that term for someone else, but for me, I thought it would be a good title for the book to sort of capture the whole arc, right? It's a term people understand, and then to contrast it with having become a judge, I thought in a couple words I could really show sort of what recovery can be and what recovery can look like.
Well, let's be honest. That's a pretty profound transition from junkie to judge.
Yes.
That's yes. From one extreme to the other.
Exactly. It was a 20-year transition, but yes, it is an important transition. And the judge title sort of captures attention, and it allows me to talk about my story and, give people some hope and hopefully reduce stigma, all of those positives.
That's the most important thing is, listen, as a lot of people, if you tell me too much ahead of time, if you don't get my attention, I'm not going to pay attention to you. I'm not going to listen to you. Well, when you say junkie to judge, you got my attention immediately. Even though it didn't apply to me anymore, I was like, I got to find out more. What's going on with this?
Yes, and the arc of it is sort of a summary of the whole. The truth is, I'm proud of having been a judge, and I'll be glad to talk about that. But it's not sort of the basis of my recovery, right? The best part of recovery is the lack of obsession, the lack of chaos. Yes. Living your positive life. But I'm really proud that I was able to accomplish becoming a judge after my history in particular.
Well, and you should be. And what I tell people is this: look, when I retired as a police sergeant, that's what I did. It took a toll. But it's not an explanation of who I am. And it's not an explanation of the person I wanted to be afterwards. And not all of it was bad. A lot of it was great. And same thing with judge. There's a lot of that, I'm sure this good, but that's what you did. It's not who you are.
That's right. It was a job. It was a job.
There's a big, big difference. And but you can't be a functioning good judge and have a drug or alcohol problem, can you?
You can't. No, most people cannot do that. I mean, especially if it's an extreme, a severe drug or alcohol problem. I'm sure there are some judges that have, milder versions of it, but not my version.
Right. And I think yours is a bit extreme, or should say to the extreme.
Yeah, it was pretty extreme. That's true.
Well, when you got other junkies, other people with drug or alcohol problems saying, hey, you better slow down, you know that's an indicator that maybe you're out of control. And we would love to say that, look, you went to bed one night and you woke up and everything's ta-da, wonderful, and that's not the way it is for most of it. It's hard-earned. That's why it's called recovery. It's not something that happens instantaneously. Is that how you describe it for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I got sober, again, I'm 32. I had a Berkeley degree, an undergraduate degree, and good grades, but then I had, an embarrassing resume for the next 10 years because I couldn't hold a job. And when I got home from rehab, my goal wasn't one day I'll be a judge. I mean, my first professional goal was let's not get fired again.
Yeah. That's a pretty good goal, by the way, Mary Beth. Hey, I choose not to get fired today. I don't want to go home and tell my spouse that, by the way, I don't have a job.
And he'd heard that often before. So, I mean, that's really where I started. I wasn't even ready for a career job when I got sober. I hadn't really worked well for 10 years. I really started where I was. My first job when I got home from rehab, despite my Berkeley degree, was a temporary, low-level, part-time admin job because it's really all I was ready to handle. For me to even go every day and show up on time, that was new behavior. I needed to sort of practice with that.
Well, and here's my story a little bit. When I retired from police work and I got sober and all that stuff happened, I started making changes in my life. My very first job was a part-time job selling pagers and cell phones and the bricks. Remember the brick phones?
Yes.
That's what I was, can I really handle this? I was scared to death. I was like a kid. I didn't know how to behave.
Exactly. I mean, for me to get up every day on time and get a shower and go to work and stay like all the hours and not leave in the middle of the day and not go back, I mean, like that was all new and it really took practice. But that's what a lot of recovery is. A lot of recovery skills are practice. And so then my second job was a full-time, permanent mid-level job, right? And so it was like, step by step moving forward. I didn't go to law school until I had 6.5 years sober.
Get out.
Because that's when I was ready. I was 39 years old, 6.5 years sober when I started Berkeley Law.
I thought that you were a lawyer before you got sober. See,
no,
that's even more amazing.
I had actually gone to Berkeley Law right out of college, but I was using so much meth that I withdrew because I couldn't get there. I mean, I literally couldn't get there. And so in my addiction, I had handed back a top 10 law school, and it took me 16 years to do it for real, to go to law school for real.
What was? Can you put your finger on anything that made you say, there's got to be another way?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I saw other people were doing it, right? I mean, other people were more functional. I mean, even my partner wasn't, a goody two-shoes guy, but when I met him, he would use drugs with me. But he would use drugs and, stop at 2 or 3 in the morning and go to bed.
Yeah, right.
And he would go to work every day. And so, I mean, I saw other people who were having forward progress in their lives, who were more stable, who were happier, and that is something that I wanted. I just wasn't sure how I was going to go about getting it.
So about 6.5 years sober, you decide to go to law school, and you graduate from there, and you become a practicing lawyer. At what point did the whole judge thing come into the play?
Yeah, so when I graduated from law school, I worked at a big law firm in Silicon Valley, which is where I lived. And then I switched over to doing class action work for the federal government. And when I was doing that work, I saw other people getting this administrative law judge job that I didn't even know existed. So like many things, when you see others do it, it captures your attention. Oh, that looks like a good path forward. I think I might want to copy them. Let me do that too, And so that's sort of how it all worked out. And I was appointed a federal judge when I I had 20 years sober. I mean, so it was, it was definitely a progression up to that point.
And I know you don't want to hear this, but you need to give yourself a pat on the back. So many people don't. They just give in and they don't try, and they die very young. And it's not just them that suffers; it's their families as well.
Yes, and I will say, I mean, my partner's always been very supportive. He's always more confident I'm going to get these things than I am, so.
So then you decided, hey, I'm going to write a book about this.
Yeah, I mean, when I was appointed a judge, it was sort of a reflection time, and I started thinking about, could my story be of use? Could I actually do something useful with my story? And that's when I started taking notes for the book, but also I didn't actually know how to write a memoir. I mean, it turns out that writing a memoir is very different than writing an excellent legal brief, and so for me, it was also the intellectual challenge that I like. Let me figure out how to do this well, and so I thought the story might be useful, and I found it challenging to do the writing and learn how to do it well.
I think it's more than useful. I think a lot of people are going to benefit. The name of the book is From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. And I want people to just shy away from the idea that this doesn't apply to you because you're not female. All right, number one. You may not have gone through all the trauma that you went through, but maybe you know someone that's got an addiction problem. Check out the book, From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. Your website is junkietoJudge.com. Can people get more information about you in the book there?
Yeah, I mean, I've written some opinion pieces like for the Wall Street Journal and the LA Times, and those are on my website, some other information about me, and then also people can message me through my website. So I answer every message. If I ever can, be of use or if people have questions, I'm happy to talk with anyone who messages me.
And the website again is junkietoJudge.com. It's not difficult to forget to remember. JunkietoJudge.com is a website. I got to ask you this. We've got like 30 seconds left. Is there anything you can't do?
Oh, yes, I can't draw.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know how to cook. I mean, there are many things that I can't do.
I'm not good at singing, and my handwriting is the worst. Mary Beth O'Connor, thank you so much for telling your story on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Very much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.